I don't think you're going to see a lot of Bitcoin payment activity until Bitcoin is much larger, much more widely held. And so I think it's a slow grind. I do think we're kind of seeing a shift away from some of these, kind of centralized custodians. And I think it's going to disperse globally. I think some of it's going to be muted for a while because it affects how much big capital can go into it. And I think it's a troubled area, but I think there's going to be future bubbles, future growth cycles in this whole space again.
Hey guys, welcome back to Let's Talk Crypto. The crypto industry had a rough time over the past 12 months. We saw multiple crashes and extensive contagion. After a slew of bankruptcies and business failures in 2022, the idea that crypto doesn't have any real value and is doomed to fail eventually was widely reinforced in traditional finance. Every now and then we'll see some big investors and media stars proclaiming the death of Bitcoin and other crypto coins. Over the last 12 months, major players in the crypto space have started to doubt the long-term prospects of their favorite projects. 2023 has been a good year so far for Bitcoin and other crypto, with prices hitting multi-month highs. This has definitely improved the overall sentiment around cryptos and restored confidence in their potential future. Yet, the crypto market has seen a significant downturn due to restraining laws and regulations, even though the prices have rocketed in the face of a tough economic scenario. In a recent interview with 0x Research, Lyn Alden, the popular macro analyst and investment strategist, shared her unique perspective on the current state of the cryptocurrency industry. With the recent drawdowns and increased regulatory scrutiny, she shared her thoughts on what the future holds for these markets, how the crypto market is changing and what investors can do to make the most of it. Alden does not believe Bitcoin and other crypto are dead. She has a lot of evidence that shows otherwise and strongly believes crypto is here to stay and will completely revolutionize the payments industry and our concept of money. Alden also brought up the Grayscale Bitcoin Trust and explained how it could provide great exposure for the cryptocurrency. Lyn Alden is a respected voice in the cryptocurrency industry. As we look towards the future of the cryptocurrency industry, it's worth listening to what Lyn Alden has to say about it. But before we do, please consider subscribing to our channel, as we bring you daily content on the latest crypto news. And now, let's jump right into the video.
If I look in the traditional macro area, most of them aren't really talking about crypto. A lot of them are kind of doing the thing where like, oh, it's dead, right? Kind of like how 2018, 2019, it just kind of not on their radar anymore. It's dead. Same, including Bitcoin for that matter. Basically, they're just like, yep, the whole space bubble, it's gone. They view it kind of like ARK style stocks, basically unprofitable growth stocks. Obviously, when I look at Bitcoin spaces or when I look at crypto spaces, which are increasingly kind of two separate spaces with some degree of overlap, basically the Bitcoin people are generally in pretty good spirits. I was at Pacific Bitcoin, for example, while FTX was happening, and so the Bitcoin price was nuking, the whole industry was nuking, and people were like celebrating and laughing about it, and just kind of just kind of rolling with it. Obviously there's a lot of development happening in the space. People often talk about lack of Bitcoin development, but of course that's mostly base layer focus. There's actually quite a bit of ecosystem development, basically making Bitcoin easier, more accessible, faster, more expressive, things like that on various parts of the ecosystem. As for crypto, this week was big. The past couple weeks, there have been a number of people warning about increasing levels of banking system cutting off various crypto entities. And then we've kind of seen the hammer come down on custodial crypto staking from the SEC. I think this has been rather telegraphed since the FTX debacle. That really kind of lit a fire under regulators, gave them a lot more, coverage to go after certain things. We've also seen a shift in the head of the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. He used to kind of talk about Ethereum being a commodity like Bitcoin. He walked those back in November, those statements back, and kind of would say, okay, Bitcoin's a commodity. We'll see about everything else. We'll leave that to the SEC, which kind of, we kind of know Gary Gensler's view on that whole thing where, Bitcoin, maybe a couple other proof of work coins are kind of, commodities in his view, while everything else is at risk of being labeled a security. So I do think we're kind of seeing a shift away from some of these, kind of centralized custodians. And I think it's going to disperse globally. I think some of it's going to be muted for a while because it affects how much big capital can go into it. And So I think it's a troubled area, but I think there's going to be future bubbles, future growth cycles in this whole space again. I think for the vast majority of people, the best thing if they want to have exposure is you just buy and cold storage some Bitcoin. That's I think the cleanest way to do it. GBTC is really and some of the others are kind of an option for people that want exposure within a brokerage account and don't really have another option. And that's kind of been the shame of the SEC is that ironically by not allowing a spot Bitcoin ETF, they've made it harder for just retail and institutional investors to access the space within certain of those pools of capital, right? Roth IRA, registered investment advisors, all these kind of pools of capital want some exposure, and they have to kind of go into worse products than they otherwise would if there was a spot ETF. We see that, for example, there's a successful spot ETF in Canada. There's also similar types of products in Europe, Latin America. It's kind of, United States has been a pretty slow jurisdiction in this regard. And so, overall, I don't think GBTC is very attractive, but it does have arbitrage opportunities if someone is willing to go deep in the weeds and kind of, watch that process unfold.
The crypto industry has had some issues, which is not uncommon for a relatively new industry. But this doesn't mean the whole thing is doomed or that we're stuck in a bear market forever. The tech behind it is really solid and there are plenty of brilliant minds working hard to make progress. Once the basic issues are sorted and the halving gets closer, the cycle is going to shift, and we can expect to see more bear and bull markets. In the interview, Lyn Alden also addressed a topic that Bitcoin holders and critics often ponder about: is it worth using your BTC to purchase simple items like coffee, if you believe its price will shoot up in future? Is it wise to just own some crypto and expect it will one day turn into the go-to currency of the world? So, the big query is, will people actually use their Bitcoin to buy stuff? Here's what Lyn Alden has to say about it.
Well, so I think in the near term, they won't. Most people won't, right? So unless you need censorship resistance or you're in an environment where it's very expensive to operate, basically a lot of frictions in terms of payments, you won't. The only people that I think will long term are people who over time, due to holding Bitcoin and due to appreciation of Bitcoin, and they don't want to go back to holding a lot of fiat, they eventually have so much Bitcoin, they want to spend their Bitcoin, right? So a lot of people that are spending Bitcoin now are people that have been holding it for 5 years, right? I think in the future, the people that have kind of been holding it now for 1, 2, 3 years, when they've been holding it for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and it's a much larger percentage of their net worth, I think an increasing number of them will want to spend it. In addition, you have things like micropayments. Like, Nostr is a good example, right? If you want to tip each other, these little kind of tipping environments, or you want to pay a relay operator, $1. It's hard to do that with something like credit cards. It's also if you do a credit card, you're now losing anonymity. In addition, when you're talking about global payments or global remittances, there's these pretty high fees on a lot of different types of payments, and you're prone to censorship. You're prone to just not being allowed. Basically, all forms of ways that block your transaction going through, or various rent seekers along the way. And so, I don't think you're going to see a lot of Bitcoin payment activity until Bitcoin is much larger, much more widely held. And so I think it's a slow grind. But one thing to keep in mind is that everybody who accepts Bitcoin strengthens the network because it increases the censorship resistance of Bitcoin. Like, let's say there was a world where nobody actually accepted Bitcoin as payment, and all is only available on, like, say 10 exchanges worldwide, and you could convert fiat to Bitcoin. You could get your Bitcoin, you could self-custody your Bitcoin, and nobody accepted the Bitcoin for anything. It wouldn't be a very censorship resistant network, because if governments wanted to stop it, they would just go to those 10 exchanges and say, okay, you're shut down, or you need to KYC everybody, XYZ. Whereas if you have more and more marginal adoption around the world, basically, different type, ATMs, different types of small merchants accepting Bitcoin. In a lot of developing countries, you can convert Bitcoin to like mobile time. So you're buying data with your Bitcoin. There's a lot of portals like this, and especially in an environment where, again, imagine like a developing world context where if overall bad payment infrastructure, inflationary currencies, I think this is like a way that you can leapfrog the current system and go right to the next system. I think a final point I'll make is that, already the more people in the world have smartphones than bank accounts. So bank accounts had a multi-century head start, and still, in a given developing country, there's a sizable percentage of the population, and in some cases, a majority of the population that does not have a bank account. Like, let's say you're a refugee, you leave a country, you go to another country, you don't have an ID with you for whatever reason, and the bank's like, well, we can't open without an ID. You're like, well, how do I get an ID? It's like, well, how do you prove, where you came from, what your birth is? It's like, well, if you can just get onboarded, with a private key and a smartphone, right? Now you're basically banked, right? And that also applies. The reason a lot of people in developing countries are not banked because they have, like, say, $100, and the bank says, well, that's not worth our time, right? But if the whole process is automated, if you're talking about like a mobile app, right, that's more workable. So I think that in a first world, developed market context where we have dollars, euros, yen, and for us, in many cases, these assets are like portfolio holdings or even cold storage holdings that we're planning to just hold for a number of years. There's very little reason to spend Bitcoin except for maybe niche circumstances, like, again, paying Noster relays or things like that. Think little online micropayments perhaps. But when you look at a global scale and long term, I think that's where you're likely to see basically these alternative payment rails be developed for either people that want censorship resistance, or that just find the technology to be better, more automated, and more accessible than what they get in fiat markets.
What are your thoughts on Lyn Alden's perspective on the current state of the crypto market? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give us a like and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. This is Let's Talk Crypto, and we'll see you in the next video.